Assalamu alaikum. My name is Fadwa Wazwaz, and I wanted to begin a presentation today. And it's going to be about seeking power without accepting responsibility. I was looking for a way to begin the talk and to use a conversation that's in public square. Sometimes it helps if people can relate at a personal level with what's going on. So I found actually a conversation to help out. And here it is. Just a word of out there. I don't know this individual, so this is not a personally directed comment against him. Don't know him. I don't know the person who's being interviewed on this show, the woman. I don't know her either. So it's not personally against her. It's not personally against him. I don't know any of them at a personal level, or even I just saw their name on the my newsfeed, basically. But the conversation that he brought is what I'm looking at. So this is not, again, me directing anything at the individuals who are part of the uncommitted movement. But he brought up the conversation, which is how I wanted to introduce this discussion or this video. He says, 60 years ago, the DNC refused to seat Fannie Lou Hamer and the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. We walk in that rich tradition of Black-led organizing that has achieved enormous progress and teaches us how to keep pushing for justice. Just think about that argument. That's what I'm getting at. Just want to look at my responses, not others. We are still of the same mind, heart, and soul. And we have not really raised our moral consciousness to the point where dropping bombs on children is not self-defense. I would be, personally, as a Palestinian, devastated if, say, 60 years from now, because he's saying 60 years ago, someone who's Palestinian gave a speech similar to Harris, and people called it diversity. Celebrating diversity should not come at the expense of normalizing harmful ideologies, forever wars, or actions. I'd be happier to have someone normalize values, morals, and agreements that end colonization, occupation, and robbing the rights of unprotected people. I gave some examples, and then I will get into my discussion. Here, Dr. Jill Stein gives some little clips from the DNC, particularly Harris, and the Republicans, and they're literally sounding exactly the same. Again, is this diversity? She's woman, he's man, he's white, she's part Indian, part Jamaican. Is that what diversity means? If they're both reading, again, the conscious level, at a moral level, they're both the same. That's what I'm trying to get at. If we could just go there. If we go a little bit further in time, this is how American soldiers terrorized Iraqi citizens in Iraq. Now, Iraq didn't attack the United States. There was no October 7th for Iraq, for the United States. It was the other way around. So you're sitting here making a big issue about October 7th, but you attacked Iraq and you terrorized the people. And you pardoned yourself. You never recognized the wrong of what you've done. Here's what I'm talking about, consciousness. We're still at the same level that we were here when this was taking place. We did not advance to recognize this was wrong. We said it's a mistake and we pardoned everybody, and then we move forward, but we really didn't feel remorse. We didn't repair the harm. I was at the fellowship with the Humphrey Institute. I raised my hand and I said, okay, well, part of restorative justice is you have to You have to repair the harm. You can't just say, I made a mistake. But no, they just pardon themselves and they bulldoze forward. What happens when we do that is the actions we've engaged in the past are repeated again. About beheaded babies in 1948, there were babies killed and beheaded by Zionist Jews, Israelis, and they just never repaired the harm. They don't even want people to talk about the Nakba. They want to talk about the Holocaust, but they don't want Palestinians to speak about the Nakba or the crimes they've committed. And so what happens is, when October 7th happens, what do? This is literally, again, it's the same pattern, history just repeating itself. They start to, again, invent lies about beheaded babies. Why? Because when you do not repair the harm, the stain of what you have done remains in your heart. And when something like October 7 happens, again, like it comes about, you worry about that stain or that sin that you've committed. Becoming exposed. And so as a way to kind of avoid people discovering the reality of who you are, you start hurling as much lies as you possibly can to kind of cover yourself from being exposed. If you can walk with me here. If you recall, Hind Rajab, again, 355 bullets. She was, again, under the power of the Israeli army. There was no Hamas in sight. 355 bullets. We all heard loud and clear across the world her anxious cries for help, her fear, her being surrounded by her dead relatives, and asking people to come and save her. So they had power, but they didn't have responsibility. They didn't have reason. All this diversity, again, now Jews are powerful, as they say. We're powerful now. 50 shades of whatever you can call it. But they still couldn't save her. Did we go forward, or are we still the same? Ahmed Smiri, he's also in Gaza. He's saying here is his neighbor and his pregnant wife. They hanged them to death and they put them on a destroyed building. You know, this is literally, again, they were persecuted in Europe. Now they are persecuting others openly. I shared in the past ADL and Alan Dershowitz. They call it progress and hope. Why? Because now they are doing what others have done unto them. This is their definition of progress and hope. Others call it a route to the hellfire, and I'll explain short. Cycle of oppression and discrimination, or you might say the state of consciousness of humanity, was not elevated. They didn't like rise to a higher level of understanding. Because sometimes, like I get in an argument with foolish people, they talk about rise. And so when you argue with them, then they like insult you, and then this is what they do. They go on stage around the world, like they do this tour. And then they'll showcase victory and they'll show, look at how many people are in the audience. And they're all clapping for it. And you're like, but we're at the same level of consciousness. Where's the rising? You know, so they don't understand how faith works. yet they want to be people who guide to faith. To them, faith is about, it's kind of, again, they sound exact, so it's not a Jewish thing. That's why I keep saying that. They sound exactly like these fellows, like members of the ADL or Alan Dershowitz. Look at us, we're powerful. Look at us, we're on stage. Look at us, people are, we've got prosperity. Look. This is literally how they judge hope and progress. And if you saw that, if you listen to the DNC, it was just placebo politics. They ignored everything that required change, required ethics, required hard work, requires, again, reparation of harm. They ignored it all. There's another journalist. If you're not following her, you should follow her. She's a policy analyst as well. She's stationed in the West Bank, occupied territories. So again, this is just yesterday, 19 hours ago, she says, as of this morning, 60 Palestinians were killed in Gaza by US-backed Israeli military. Killing every day, massacre. I just saw this through my feed. I don't know this individual, but he asks a good question. Can somebody explain to me why only about 5 to 10% of us know what the hell is going on? Again, 50 shades of whatever is why we're all ignorant of what's going on. I'd like to go to where I need to as I mentioned, a lot of my content, when I share it, there are individuals who just like waiting, like breathing down my neck. And as soon as I share it, they reclaim it as their own. And then they tell people to review their content instead of reviewing my content. And then they want people to promote them and praise them for my reflections and my content. This is Dalia Mugahed and Imam Majid. Again, what are they seeking? Are they really seeking to invite people to God? Or are they seeking to be famous, praised, well-known, to be on stage and to be promoted for other people's work? They're telling people to literally give them to recognize their work. What are they seeking? That's the work of someone else. But this is, again, the type of people we also have in our community. Then they call it progress or hope. I left off with, this came across, so from her DNC. So she mentions that as a commander-in-chief, she will ensure America always is the strongest, most lethal fighting force in the world. So is she trying to elevate human consciousness? Has human consciousness ever been elevated through fear? When somebody is the most lethal, like let's just say you have somebody who's a serial killer roaming in town, and they're also sharing whatever wisdom that they want to share. And yet you're in petrified fear of this most lethal force. Would you consider anything that person has to say? Has society ever been advanced at a conscious moral level through fear? Through fear of death, of destruction? In any case, she's also a prosecutor and the vice president. She was formerly a prosecutor, then the vice president. And I mentioned in a letter to her on my social media, I was not really impressed. You failed to address the fundamental issues confronting our nation. You were in power for some number of years. I want to hear about how you've accepted responsibility with the power you had to address the people who are being impacted with that power. That's what I want to hear. As a prosecutor, if I spoke in the manner she spoke and tried to scare the daylights out of people, I would have, again, I would have the FBI coming, knocking on my door. Someone went to court. She's a prosecutor. She dealt with criminals. So she should know the criminal mindset. And they came and they said, we're going to be the most lethal force in the US or whatever state she's in. They would be held in contempt of court and arrested. Forget that. Just say the Hamas or Palestinian authorities, or even like the neighboring countries of Israel. They spoke out and they said, we're going to be the most lethal force against Israel. Then they do label them, they do call them terrorists. So what is she calling to? And what call did she respond to? She's Indian, she's Jamaican, and she's a woman. Supposedly, she belongs to the group, you might say, who are weak. Speaking about normally, like, Jamaicans, Indians, they were colonized. Women, there's the nonstop discussion of men oppressing women. So there were lessons in that. We learn what not to do. Now, she was, all weak people, not just her, all weak people are invited by the arrogant to follow them. So this is a conversation that takes place in hellfire. And the weak, those who are like, you might say, oppressed, in a sense, like they didn't have a voice, are invited, because everyone invites to their nature. They're not going to, like, you give what you own. If you're somebody who's morally bankrupt, then you are in war and you start, modeling women's lingerie. It's expected. Why? Because you give what you own. You're full of shame, you give shame. And so if you're full of guidance, meaning, here it's kind of like they're using the satanic mentality of blame it on God. If had God guided us, they could have sought guidance from God, but they didn't. They did not seek guidance, but meaning that they were not guided. The more correct way, if they were honest, they would say, we'd never sought guidance, so we didn't receive guidance. But in any case, they were not guided. So they recognized they were not guided. So how could we guide you? What call are you responding to as an oppressed person? Because a lot of oppressed people, as the Quran says, and they shall appear before Allah on the day of resurrection, and the weak will say to those who are arrogant, those who are doing the oppressing, those who are the tyrants, verily, we were just following you. We're trying to be like you. We took you as the goal. To be like you was our goal. So you have to avail anything from God's torment, because now we're being punished. So we need you to protect us from this punishment that we're facing. And they will say, well, if we were guided, we would have guided you. They didn't turn to God to seek guidance. What do you think they're going to give you? Guidance? Do we see morals coming out of the Iraq war? Do we see morals coming out of what Israel's doing in Gaza? No. So what are they going to give you when you take them as a role model? Light? They're going to give you light, enlightenment? They're going to give you morals? They're going to give you understanding or guidance? No, they don't have it to give it to you. They didn't seek it to give it to you. It makes no difference to us now whether we rage or bear these torments with patience. There is no place of refuge for us. Situation was both of these individuals were tested. One was tested with being oppressed and they had to bear it with patience. And the arrogant were tested and they had to be grateful, responsible, use reason, and then take care of those who are oppressed. These should have turned to God, those who were oppressed, received guidance, and responded to those. I mentioned previously the man, the two men in the garden, where one was blessed and the other one was like deprived from the same amount of sustenance, and how the arrogant looked at the one who was deprived, but how the other one, he had faith. Instead of using him as a role model or a goal, he guided him, turned him to like, your response is pathetic, basically, in a nutshell, that you're arrogant, you're not being grateful for the grace upon you, and you're looking down on me. Why didn't you turn to God in gratitude? And so, I gave that example previously, but again, it's about which call are you responding to? Are you turning to God and seeking guidance, taking that guidance, and then sharing it with those who are arrogant and oppressing? Are those who are oppressing turning to God? Clearly, they're not. From their response here, had God guided us, which is, again, shows that they're turning to who? Just that response alone. They're turning to their ego. And the ego's the BFF of Satan. This is how Satan speaks. This is the argument of Satan. Because you put me astray, tells God. So if you don't turn to God, you're going to turn to your ego. And your ego colludes with Satan. And that's the response right here. The scholarly commentary is, the word baruz means expose. They shall appear before God. Expose is another way of saying it. Where did I show you? I had it here. Yes, here. All will appear exposed before God. And the weak ones will say to the haughty ones. So again, it helps to read more than one translation. But the word is, again, baruz, right here. They will be exposed before God. That is why it has been translated to shall appear before God. For it implies both these meanings. As a matter of fact, all the people are fully exposed all the time before God, but they do not realize it. They will, however, realize it on the day of judgment, when they shall be presented before the greatest of all judges, that they were fully exposed before him all along. So much so that every deed they did and each and everything they thought and desired is known to him. This is to serve as a warning to all those people who follow others blindly or obey and submit to tyrants because they say, we are weak. They are warned as if to say, you should know well that those leaders, saints, officers, rulers whom you are following blindly today will not be able to protect you at all from the chastisement of God. Therefore, you should consider it well today where such people whom you are following or obeying are themselves going and where they are leading you. This is important for us to reflect on because that's the message I wanted to share with Kamala Harris. And I share with her a passage from the Quran. Here's the queen. These are, again, two healthy forces of power. I always share like the weak and the arrogant, you know. Today I put in a passage of the Quran where the weak follow the arrogant. They follow them such that they make them their goal. But here there are two forces of power, and they communicate with each other, and they test each other, and this is the test that they get, just briefly. We know of her wisdom and her knowledge is she learned what not to do. She explains kings, when they enter a country, they spoil it, and they make its noble people the meanest, meaning like they're the lowest people, and they take the ones who are morally bankrupt and they put them on top. They destabilize the region. And they do it all for what? Just like why we go into Iraq? We wanted oil. We wanted to take the resources. Why do people go and despoil countries, destabilize regions? They want to steal their resources. So she sent him, you might say, money. Just, you know, it's like if you look at the politicians, ask the question, who's taking large donations? Because if you're sitting here saying like, I love Israel, just be honest. Just say, I got a large donation from AIPAC and I'm saying what they wanted me to say. That's why you're saying it. It's not because you're speaking out of conviction for Israel. You got a large donation and that donation is influencing your position on Israel. It's not international law. It's not terrorism. It's not Hamas. It's none of these things. What's influencing you and your position on Israel is you got a nice cushion of a donation. It's not anti-Semitism, because if it was true, I know quite a few Native Americans who would love to see your voice and your help here locally. Not just in Minnesota, but the United States, also African Americans. Why don't you focus on those you have power over? Your responsibility, if you're seeking power, the responsibility is to those under your power, not Israel. But again, when you receive this nice cushiony gift from AIPAC, you should be honest and say, because I received a nice cushiony gift from AIPAC, this is my view on Israel. Let's stop pretending all that other cool stuff. Now she knows what to look for if this person is negative or, you know, again, a greedy, again, vile person or not. So when Solomon received the gift, he's saying that what you gave me in wealth, that what God gave him in guidance is much greater than what you're giving me in wealth. So he rejected her gift. So she's like, this is someone different. Okay, he's not acting like the typical tyrannical person that I'm expecting. First of all, his letter comes off with, in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. And then he's rejecting to be bribed. He's not coming here out of greed. Now, if we study history, the way society was interacting at the time, you can't measure them by international law now, but how they were engaged then was different. As a person of faith, when you are given power, you are actually supposed to bring an end to this type of tyranny. Now, there's other forces that Prophet Suleiman, of all the prophets, was given power or to be used. And that was, there's a group of species called jinn. You might find it, funny. It's like because we don't have the necessary technology to engage them, but they do exist. And not only do they exist, but they have powers that maybe in the future we will discover, future generations. They can bring an object, as they mentioned here to Suleiman. They can bring the entire throne of the Queen of Sheba within the twinkling of an eye, right before Prophet Suleiman. So these are powers that we are not aware of. A lot of times when we're thinking we're going to be the most lethal force in the whole world, there's forces that you are not even aware of. That's what I'm trying to get at. There are forces that you are not aware of. It's within our interest to be humble, within our interest to have reason, within our interest to be wise. There are forces of power that you are not even aware of. You're putting your full reliance on your nuclear bombs. What if there's forces that can actually deactivate all those nuclear bombs and you cannot rely on any of those anymore? You are being tested. And this is what Suleiman recognized when he saw this right before his eyes, the throne of the Queen of Sheba. He said, "This is by the grace of my Lord to test me whether I am grateful or ungrateful. And if any is grateful, truly his gratitude is a gain for his own soul. But if any is ungrateful, truly my Lord is free of all needs, supreme in honor." People who are grateful do not mock and ridicule people to be grateful. They role model gratitude. They don't say, "You're not grateful." They role model gratitude. So they will speak something like this: "This is a test from my Lord. Test me whether I am grateful or ungrateful." Instead of telling, "Yeah." It shows if you really reflected on the Quran and you thought about the Quran, given how you share reflections of faith. Now he wants to test her for the same reason she's testing him, because he also recognizes this. Tyrants, they enter a country, they destabilize it, they destroy it. They look for the criminals of the country, or the most lowest of the low, to put them on top. That's what they call to, so that the others can do their dirty work for them and they can control their society, like we're seeing today. So he wants to know what kind of a person is this. So he puts her throne, but he transforms it out of all recognition. Let's see whether she's guided to the truth or is one who receives no guidance. Is she an arrogant person who feels entitled? So when she arrived, she was asked, "Is this my throne? Is this thy throne?" She was asked, excuse me. She said, "Yes, it was just like this. And knowledge was bestowed on us in advance of this." So here she's not even thinking about her throne. She's going around and she's doing her research and investigation about Prophet Suleiman. And what she finds is that this is a noble person. He's not like this. But here you see, again, she's someone who, if you listen, she has underneath her a lethal weapon of war. We are men endued with strength, given to vehement war. The command is with thee, so consider what thou wilt command. So here she is, a woman full of wisdom, within her hand the power, the most lethal weapon you could say, that she could fight a war with. But she wants to talk to Solomon. She's not going to use fear to advance the conversation. Now, she thinks she's right. Solomon thinks he's right. But her idea of rising is not to just knock out Solomon and put herself on there. That's how tyrants think. Her idea is she wants to share what she believes out of her own genuine goodwill is right, is beneficial to society. Usually people like that are also open to listening and to receiving if someone shares with them what is beneficial to society. She's not open to listening. She just wants to speak. I'm speaking. And she wants to scare the living damnation out of people and just scare people into submission. Tyrant. In women clothing, as an Indian, as a Jamaican, did we advance human consciousness, human morals? No. So I had a discussion on this more than one time, various individuals. I'm sure it's 27, 29, 33. I just want to give you the part towards the end. You know, I will send them a gift, see what answer my envoys return. Sentence is not meant to, again, express pride and vanity. What is meant to say is, I have no desire for your wealth. I only desire that you should believe or at least submit to a righteous system. If you agree to neither of these alternatives, it's not possible for me to accept the bribes of wealth and leave you free in the matter of a wicked system of life. What my Lord has given me is enough for me to cherish my desire for your wealth. So he's not operating out of greed, and he's not easily moved by bribes of wealth, as we're seeing with US politicians. But again, here it is. And so the queen reached Jerusalem, and how she was received has been omitted. The story is resumed from the time when she arrived at the palace to see Prophet Suleiman. This is a meaningful sentence, which means whether she understands or not that it's her own throne, which has been fetched in no time from her capital to a distant place like Jerusalem, and also whether she is guided after seeing the wonderful miracle of persist in her ear. This refutes, again, the wrong idea of people who say that Prophet Suleiman intended to take possession of the throne. He was trying to test her. Are you obsessed? You know, because a lot of times people fight for power, you know, insurrection. You know, once you get in power, you're like, I ain't letting go. He wants to see, is she somebody who's attached to the seat of power? Or she recognizes the responsibility that power carries. Notice she could have went into war, subjected her people to a horrible war, which is going to harm a lot of people, cost a lot of money, cost a lot of lives. But she was more interested in taking care of her people. She had to recognize the responsibility of making such a decision of war is not an easy decision. And it carries a lot of responsibility. There's a lot of consequences to going to warfare. This sentence, again, has been added by Allah to clarify the queen's position, saying that she was not somebody like who's obstinate, oppositional, a bad person. So we don't look at people, look at everyone in society as a property of God. Just because you're a Muslim or you're a practicing Muslim doesn't mean that you look at people like you are better than them. You don't know what they are, what their state is with God. In her case, the test clearly identifies she still believed in a righteous system. She just accepted now that Solomon's system is a better system. But she was trying her best to be fair and responsible with the system she had, that she was governing her people with. I won't go further into here, but as I said, I had done this discussion more than once. Let me find you the here. And this is with Kais Arthur. I did it before also. She's not of the oppositional profile. She's, again, figure of authority, from far from a typical figure, most lethal, weapon. So she's not sitting here thinking about, I want to harm people to rule, subjugate them. She consults her court, doesn't just go ship arms to places just to bomb them and then wonder why October 7th, just why it happened. She has political competence, intellectual competence, she has lofty character. These are all signs of who she was. She may be contrasted again with Egypt's Pharaoh, who became deluded with power. We have a woman who's aware of her circumstance, consults with her court, seeks out wisdom. Wise people do not presume they are wise. They seek out wisdom, as was said when we discussed Salman al-Farisi. So she obviously was called to be on stage. Everyone who calls on stage and they're corrupt, they offer you what? Bribes. You give what you own. They don't offer you morals. They offer you bribes. They offer you power. And so she knew what not to be. So when he put the throne, she did not also obsess with her throne the way that other people obsess with being in power. He was testing her character, and she was doing likewise. As Imam al-Baghawi and others mentioned in our books of tafsir, both parties were sincere and genuine, and by that point, they were both directed to God. Queen Bilqis' empire was symbolized in her beautiful throne. She was not attached, though, to her throne or to the seat of power, and recognized it despite the change to its appearance. Furthermore, she was not moved by its presence where it was not supposed to be. Like you had this beautiful throne that your heart was really attached with, and it symbolized your greatness. And so you saw it somehow in someone else's possession, you'd be frantic. You'd be like wondering, how did you take my throne? But she seemed like casual in her response. It seems is like it, which the scholars of tafsir mention, show the strength of her intellect, as well as non-attachment to the world, since she stopped short of expressing certainty when what was apparent didn't indicate certainty. She was also more interested in being responsible for her people, fulfilling the responsibility that she has, than seeking power and rejecting that responsibility, which is what most people in power do. We find a reference to knowledge in Solomon's court and the court of the Queen of Sheba. The queen's testing Prophet Salman was like. Salman al-Farisi, when he came to Medina with foreknowledge to test Prophet Muhammad. Upon him, peace and blessing. He was given knowledge of what to look for from the Christian priest. So likewise, she's someone who seeks out wisdom. What should I look for? How do I know this person is not a bad king? Similarly, she was given knowledge of how to test him from her spiritual advisors. We do not know what it was in its entirety, but Imam al-Razi and others mention signs in the conduct of Solomon himself was taken into account. But it was to test his sincere, genuine, and truthfulness. And by the time the queen reached Solomon and beheld her own throne, she was already convinced of the truthfulness of his claim of prophethood. Everything that she knew and was advised to look for was there, so she did what a sincere person of integrity does. When the writing's on the wall, you submit to it. So she was calling in her, again, healthy power. She was calling to fulfill the responsibility, take care of her people. She had a system. And he was calling to healthy power, a fair system of rule. One where, as we're seeing right now, some individuals are calling to destabilize the entire Middle East. Literally, in their own words, they're calling for destabilization of the Middle East. Let me find you the clip. I have to stop sharing and reshare, so hold on a second. Let me just play it from the beginning so you could hear what he's saying.
Recommend that the United States launch preemptive attacks upon at this point?
The answer is categorically yes. The two nations that are vying, competing with each other, who will be the first to achieve nuclear weapons, is Iraq and Iran. A third nation, by the way, is Libya as well. While no one is watching, under the cloak, is trying very rapidly to build an atomic bomb capability. The question that you ask, I think, is vital. It's important, and that is, what do you do about it? You have to dismantle the network, and the question is, do you dismantle all of it at once? No. The first thing you did after the wake-up call on September 11th was that you took on the first regime, the obvious regime. You removed the Taliban regime and you scattered Al-Qaeda, although it has not been completely destroyed yet. Now the question is, what's your next step? Knowing that 3 of these nations are developing nuclear weapons. This is not a hypothesis. It is fact. Iraq, Iran, and Libya are racing to develop nuclear weapons. So now what is the next step? I believe that the next step is to choose. It's not a question of whether you have to take action, but what kind of action and against whom. If I had to choose, should there be military action first against Iraq or first against Iran, I would choose to go after Iraq.
Again, so you see, it goes back to the question of that I mentioned in the very beginning. What call are you responding to? So their idea of progress, the Nazis were persecuting them, and their idea was that they could be great like the Nazis, stabilize countries, stabilize the region, and that's progress, and that's so they responded to that call. They were weak, they were oppressed, but instead of listening to reason and turning to God and seeking guidance and guiding those around them, taking society where they were at, getting rid of supremacy, getting rid of discrimination, elevating Europe. They respond to that call and they follow the Zionist, again, nature, the Nazi nature, into the Middle East. And now they want to go ahead and destroy, if you will. They want to destroy other countries. And similarly, a woman, Jamaican, Indian, she's seeing, these people are powerful. And she wants to be powerful too. She wants to be able to be lethal. And, you know, that's what they're seeing. They're being called to be great. You know, somebody clapping for them, to be lethal. They're seeing that as being tough means courage. Toughness and being the most lethal weapon is not courage. Being criminal is not being courageous. Those are two different things. You're being criminal here. You were called to criminality and you responded to criminality. That road leads to hellfire. That road leads to hellfire. If you're a woman and you follow that road, you end up in hellfire. If you're a man, you call to that road, you end up in hellfire. If you're Indian, Jamaican, Palestinian, you end up in hellfire. So I end with, so a lot of times people claim the reason they're supporting Kamala Harris is because they want to see a woman as president. Well, you have an opportunity now for a woman as president. So if it's the idea that you're supporting her because you want to be represented and you want a woman as president, fine. Well, here's a woman who's president, who's running for president. And she's not calling to criminality. She's calling for, again, she's calling for peace, fair system, taking care of our planet, and making sure that we treat other nations the way we want those nations to treat us. I would encourage you, check out her party, check out the work she's doing. If you want to just be represented by a woman, check to see what you're being called to and what she's calling to, and learn to differentiate between courage and criminality. Being the most lethal weapon is not courage. We don't call gangsters who threaten you to tear you apart courageous. We call them criminals. You can't be condemning terrorism, and yet you're here openly, transparently telling the whole world you're going to be the most lethal weapon in the world. So we have to accept responsibility and ask ourselves, what call are we responding to? Because we cannot say on the day of judgment that those we are following, who are arrogant, meaning like they're in power and great, we cannot say that they misled us. They're not turning to God for guidance. They're not guided. They're going to give you what they own. If supremacy is their language, if being criminal is their way of life, then they're going to call you to criminality. And they're going to call it courage. But it's criminality. And if you respond and you're Black and you're a woman and you're whatever diverse group you belong to, you're just going to be responding to criminality. So you have to reflect on this very well, because things do end up coming back to us. They do end up coming back to us. Maybe not in this world. Maybe we'll escape in this world and we'll think we've escaped, but they do end up coming to us. And this is what this verse is really telling us. That it's in Arabic. I'll update this post here to give you the translation. Basically, in a nutshell, it's saying that on the day of judgment, everyone will be given their book of deeds in their hand, and they will be said, sufficient are you as a witness, read your own book. So just to reflect on the call, and which call are you responding to? Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.